I've got 6:30. I'd like to open this, call to order this meeting of the Finance Committee for Thursday, March 16th, 2023, in the Recoit Meeting Room. First order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now if we could have a moment of silence for those who have lost their lives in service to our community. Thank you. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none. Entertain a motion to approve the Finance Committee meeting minutes of Thursday, March 9th, 2023 in open session.
Motion.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yes, I would like to discuss page 8 of the minutes, in which there is a couple of articles mentioned where Mr. Weiner made a motion to hold article number 31. And right below that, it says that Lee Smith made a motion to recommend article 31. In fact, I recommended article 32 and 33, which were both related to the library. But 31, I did not recommend, so I didn't know if that should be deleted.
You remember what Article 31 was?
Okay.
It's one that we wanted to hold.
I think that's the case. I think there was no money.
Yeah, 31 is one of the solar.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So the motion, the suggestion is to strike that line regarding Article 31.
Well, 31 was a big long one.
31, 32,
That was a
We
big.
have 31.
31 was a biggie.
yeah, we got the 31 on hold, but there's. On hold. Yeah, it just looks like. Yeah, so. You can just strike that, all of that pertaining to the 31.
Yep.
The motion and the vote, those don't apply. So, are you, Darlene, are you good with
Yes.
that modification?
Yes.
Richard, are you good with that?
Yeah.
All right, so, any opposition to,
So that means it is not on hold any longer? Is that what we're voting on?
no, 31's still on hold. It's just the reference to Lee Smith making a motion to recommend Article 31 is incorrect. We're just taking that out.
Okay.
That's all. So any opposition to approving the minutes as amended?
No.
Hearing none, passes by unanimous consent. All right. Nothing for appointments and hearings. nobody from the select board, nobody from the school committee. All right, into old business. We've got a couple of presenters tonight. Planning board will not be here, they had a conflict. They will be, have let me know that they will be able to be here next week. So they will be on the agenda for next week. And we have somebody from the Conservation Commission. If you don't mind, starting by introducing yourself.
Sure. Drew McManus, Conservation Agent, Herring Warden for the town of Mashpee.
Thank you. So, committee members had a few questions regarding Articles 29, 30, and 31. So let's just start, if you can just give us an overview of those three articles?
Well, we only have two before the commission, on the town warrant, both under Chapter 172-2 and -7. I'm not familiar with the third article.
I think that's, Mr. Chairman, I think that's, these are Article 35 and 36.
Oh, sorry, yes, 35, 36, sorry.
No problem. Just
I
making
was
sure I
reading the
didn't
wrong line.
miss anything.
We can add a third one.
No, no, that's fine. That's my mistake.
So essentially, the purpose of the article is to propose an expansion of the existing 100-foot buffer zone under Chapter 172 of Mashpee's wetland bylaw. The current 100-foot buffer zone extends landward from the most landward wetland area, and that can vary, obviously, from place to place. But it establishes a 100-foot buffer zone of jurisdiction, which essentially means you have to come to the Concom if you're looking to alter any areas within 100 feet of a wetland. So that's the current buffer zone regulation or standard. We're looking to expand that by 50 feet. This came about from a review of all the town's regulations from a consulting firm of Fuss & O'Neill through the town's municipal vulnerability grant program. Fuss & O'Neill are consultants that were hired to take a look at all the town's regulations and bylaws and make suggestions in regards to trying to improve water quality throughout town. So one of the suggestions was to take a look at our bylaw and area of jurisdiction and expand it by 50 feet. There are 4 other towns in the Commonwealth that currently have a 150-foot buffer zone under their wetland regulations. They're all inland towns, they're not coastal towns, but we did reach out to them to get more information on how that came about and the results of it. The purpose is what we're looking to do is to come up with a virtually no-cost initiative to try and improve not only water quality, but rapidly fragmented and disappearing wildlife habitat in these transition zones from upland development and water bodies and waterways and wetlands. Right now, under the current regulations, if you are looking to develop on a currently undeveloped lot, the first 50 feet of that lot landward of a wetland line must be preserved in its natural vegetated state, with some exceptions for a pathway to access the water and what we call vista pruning to acquire a view of the water or water body or wetland. So those are allowable, permittable activities within that first 50 feet. Other than that, there's no alterations allowed. That's for undeveloped lots. For previously developed lots, which makes up obviously the majority of jurisdiction under the Wetlands Protection Act, this proposed increase in the buffer zone won't really have much impact as far as what a landowner can or cannot do on their property from current standards. We have in place what's called a waiver of standards. It's similar to a zoning board's variance in spirit. It's the same purpose, asking for relief from regulatory standards based on specific criterion. And this waiver of standards really applies to these previously developed lots, or what we call pre-existing non-conforming lots. And it's a way to allow for a landowner to expand development on a lot, limited, reasonable expansion, in exchange for establishing mitigation or compensatory plantings as close to the wetland edge as possible. And in some cases, some properties have this buffer zone, they have a diminished buffer zone, or they have no buffer zone at all. So in recognition of those varying conditions, existing conditions, this waiver allows for the commission to review projects on previously developed lots in exchange for this type of mitigation requirement. And it varies, obviously, based on what's being proposed. And we also have a chart called a mitigation calculation chart, where numbers are put into the chart based on the square footage of what's being proposed, and depending on the setback from that proposed development to the wetland itself. It goes by 5-foot increments, and you plug in square footage of structure, and the closer you get to the wetland line, that ratio of mitigation gets higher and higher and higher. So it's kind of a negative. It's a good incentive to not encourage development too close to a wetland from what's already existing. Limited, reasonable development is what the commission's looking for. So they weigh different criterion to evaluate what's being proposed and what's being exchanged in terms of mitigation, and try to come up with a reasonable, balanced compromise. The 50-foot expansion, there's a couple of reasons for this. We're seeing that this current mitigation chart that we have in the waiver really doesn't make a meaningful difference. And even by increasing it by 50 feet, which may seem minimal on the surface, it actually does, based on well-vetted scientific literature, increase the pollution attenuation. In other words, the uptake of nutrients, phosphorus, and nitrogen from the establishment of native vegetation on a lot where there is none, and also increases the value of wildlife habitat in that really crucial transition zone between developed areas and wetlands. So based on that literature, you're talking about a 10 to 15% increase in pollution attenuation and greater wildlife habitat, particularly bird nesting habitat. So that's really the overview and the intent of this. It is really important to point out, and you have this information on your frequently asked questions sheet that I just passed out, is that this will not be prohibitive in terms of development from the current standards. It's just going to either require more mitigation on previously developed lots, and it will set a standard currently that's a 50-foot zone of no touch to 75 feet. Now again, in those cases for undeveloped lots within wetlands jurisdiction, if it turns out that this 75-foot zone of no touch would render the lot undevelopable based on other setbacks, that waiver can be asked for before the commission to take that into consideration and work with the applicant to come up with an amicable solution. But nothing about this is prohibitive at all. The standards, the opportunities are the same. It's just an expansion of jurisdiction. So it may include some areas where a septic system currently is just outside the 100-foot to a very sensitive water body. Now it may put that septic system within jurisdiction. Road runoff from an abutting road may currently be outside the 100-foot. Now it may include that with this 50-foot expansion. So there's just a couple of examples, scenarios where this may result in a net environmental benefit in terms of jurisdiction and how we can go about mitigating it. So in my opinion, there's no real financial loss for the property owner. There may be a compromise, a balance, but no real financial loss. This is truly a no-cost initiative that we're trying to implement. It's a piece of the puzzle to try and attain better water quality. It's not the solution. It's just a step on the way towards the solution. So that's.
So you're looking, essentially, you would be looking to work with the homeowner to try to accomplish what you need to accomplish, and at the same time, trying to get them to be able to do what they would want to do.
Correct. Yes, it's just, so that opportunity doesn't change, in other words, from what's currently in place. It's just, these areas, these wetland buffers are really kind of what I consider the last line of defense. And so, if you're looking to build a large home in any other area away from wetlands as compared to right up against wetlands, this is where that balance and kind of sacrifice comes into play.
Is this retroactive? Does it happen, or is it just for new construction?
Can you say that again?
Is it this retroactive?
No, it is not retroactive.
Okay, so it's only for new construction?
New construction, that's correct. Yeah.
And when you say new construction, you mean whether it's a new undeveloped piece of property being built or an add-on or something like this, it would affect that.
What's it?
So if I had an undeveloped piece of land and I wanted to build on it, it possibly could affect that.
Yes.
Not prohibit it, but could affect it.
Yes.
And if I wanted to have an add-on to my house or something like that, that could affect it too.
Yes, but in different ways.
How so?
So for currently developed lots, you'd be looking at a higher standard of mitigation based on that chart that I mentioned. The numbers will reflect the 150-foot buffer zone as currently they reflect a 100-foot buffer zone. For an undeveloped lot, because of that increase to 75 feet as opposed to 50, if it's a small lot to begin with, the impact could be a little higher in terms of what your wish list is to develop that lot, all things considered.
Well, depending on where you are, you may have just a stamp size footprint, right? So it may be difficult to get what you want.
It could. That is conceivable, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we did a breakdown of lots that are remaining in wetlands jurisdiction, and that does include the 100-year floodplain, which Mashpee has wetlands jurisdiction over. I'm not aware of any other town that actually has wetlands jurisdiction over the floodplain. It is a resource area that is protected under the State Wetlands Protection Act, but the state is currently working on standards for development in the flood zone, whereas currently they have no standards. Mashpee has considerable standards for development in the flood zone under our wetland bylaw. So, yes, the impact could be more significant on undeveloped lots, but considering the number of undeveloped lots left, which is 23 approximately, you're not talking about a lot of impact across the spectrum for residents of the town. And again, there is opportunity to work with the commission to try and get something in place that's reasonable, given the setback of the lot to a wetland and the overall size of a lot in general within wetlands jurisdiction.
And how would this be sort of regulated in terms of, let's say somebody comes before you to ask for some kind of a exception or waiver, and you decline it because it just doesn't fit, then how would it be monitored?
How would we enforce it? Well, I mean, we communicate with all other regulatory boards in town, so obviously if somebody's building a house, they have to get a building permit, they have to get a permit from the Board of Health, and we have software called Permitize where every department has to sign off, even if you're not involved directly with, a particular regulatory reference, or situation. You still have to sign off to make sure that we're all on the same page about every decision that's made in each regulatory department. So that's probably the most effective way it would be enforced is communication amongst the.
A property, though, that is not going to renovate or expand would not then be subject to this, a property where the individual is not going to do anything?
No. No, it's not retroactive to what's legally. I should point out, if it's something that they've done without a permit, then yes, it would be subject to this. But like anything else, even if we weren't having this initiative, it would still be subject to in that scenario. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes. So you mentioned, just going to throw some questions out, okay?
Yeah, sure.
So you mentioned that there's no cost to the homeowner, but what about, how would you think this might affect land values, especially on those coastal homes that we have so many in Mashpee, where those taxes are a little higher and people are paying a higher premium?
Right.
How might it affect their land values? So could it have an effect on them in some way?
I suppose it could. I mean, if you were a homeowner and you had a lot in that situation, and let's say it was like a postage stamp size lot, and you were looking to put a 4-bedroom house on there, or you were looking to, have a house, patio, deck, pool, and garage on that lot, there's going to have to be some balance there.
Some reasonable discussion.
Reasonable discussion. Right now, I mean, what's considered a reasonable development on a single-family lot, a single-family home, some landscaping and hardscaping. What's not considered a normal or pertinent to a single-family home, at least in terms of our regulatory standards and waiver requirements, are things like pools and excessively sized patios and decks and things and excessive lawns, those sorts of things. Again, it draws back to what's reasonable. And it doesn't mean that those things can't be accommodated. If there's a creative way to get those in place and, while still meeting the standards, then the commission will certainly take that into consideration. But they're looking at it from what's a reasonable development of a single-family lot. So it comes down to how many appurtenances are you really looking for? And I understand, yes, that can certainly increase the property value. So there would conceivably be property value loss depending on what your vision of developing that
Right.
property is. Yeah.
And you mentioned that someone could come and they could request a waiver, especially if it's something like a pre-existing non-conforming or even a new development.
Right.
How willing is the Conservation Committee to work with someone in that situation, in most cases?
So in my opinion, I think they are open-minded in terms of this, but again, there's a fine line between what's excessive and what's reasonable, and I think they're pretty good at making that assessment between the two. They're not going to get it right every time, and I will say there's no such thing as a level playing field when it comes to the Wetlands Protection Act, because every lot is different, every lot has differing circumstances. So to try and achieve a level playing field is just impossible, to be perfectly blunt. But from my experience, I think they're, considering the water quality issues in town, the loss of habitat and the high degree of fragmented habitat in these transition wetland zones, that, they're going to take that into consideration as a top priority because that's their purview. But they've always been willing to work with applicants from my experience. There's always been ongoing dialogue. If there isn't a meeting of the minds and we're like, well, so if I'm a consultant and I hear from the commission it's steering towards a denial, I've seen time and time again where they say, well, I would like to ask it for a continuance to go back to my client and discuss these options, and the commission is always more than willing to grant that continuance, maybe even a second one, and continue to work to a reasonable degree to work with the clients, the applicants, and their clients, if it's a consultant representing them, to try and achieve a workable outcome.
If they could not achieve a workable outcome, is there a way to appeal that decision from that board?
Yes, there is. So, and there is a distinction there. It's a good question. So if it's a wetland type that's covered under both the state and local bylaw, there's a lot of mirroring regulations for many wetland resource areas. They can appeal to the state, and there is a process for that. Kind of in a nutshell, they submit the appeal paperwork, which is already attached to the original application. It explains the whole process to the applicant, so it's pretty clear how they go about doing it. They have, I believe, 60 days from the day of issuance of a denial to start the process for an appeal. DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, receives the appeal paperwork, and they schedule what's called a superseding on-site, which is all parties, the Conservation Commission, the agent, the homeowner, and their consultant, and anyone else who needs to be brought on board, with a reviewer from DEP, and they kind of just ask all questions about what happened, how did we get here, what are the bones of contention, what are the issues, everything and anything that can be brought out and discussed. Then the DEP reviewer goes back, puts together all the information, conducts a review, and then comes out with one of two decisions. They will either uphold the Concom's decision, or they'll issue what's called a superseding order of conditions, which means DEP is overturning the Concom's decision and approving this project subject to their own conditions, which may be very general in nature, not as specific as the commission. And then the commission would issue a mirroring order of conditions to match the superseding order under our bylaw. If the filing involves jurisdiction under the bylaw only, and there are certain types of resource areas, flood zone being one of them, isolated land subject to flooding, inland bank, and coastal banks that have standards that are above and beyond the state standards, so they're bylaw jurisdiction only. If there's an appeal under the bylaw only and not the state, if it's dealing with those types of resource areas, they have to take it to court.
Okay.
Yep.
So there's a way for someone.
There's a way.
If they want to.
Yep.
And the areas that are there that are undeveloped, is it possible that because of these changes, they would be totally undeveloped from what you see? That it would stop someone from developing at this point? If this passes?
I think And you know, when I say this, it's nothing that's an official determination.
Understood.
'Cause I'm not the
official,
commission.
just your best guess. That's all I'll take that, right?
Yeah, I could see a couple of lots that I feel that regardless of this buffer zone expansion shouldn't be developed in the first place because there's so little upland between, you know, developable portion. Taking into consideration everything else, the setbacks for septic system, side lot setbacks, and wetland setbacks, that the lots should essentially be offered up to the town for sale as open space.
Right.
Because I don't think that they should be developed in their current situation under the current regulations, regardless of this proposed expansion. So yes, there are some, very few.
That
but
could
there
fit
are
into
some.
that category.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And they're privately held?
Huh?
Are they privately held, those properties?
All of them, yes, yep.
So what you're saying is that they may be too close to the water to do anything. There may be no room for them
There may
really
be,
to do anything.
yeah, I mean, and they could be, you know, based on the current wording of regulations, they could be conceivably developed, but maybe with a tiny home and, you know, an above-ground raised IA septic system and, you know, the full-blown, you know, maximum, type of situation to reduce environmental impact to the, you know, to the greatest degree possible. So, but even with all that in consideration, there are still some lots where even that scenario wouldn't work.
Right,
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah. Small handful.
Okay. You mentioned data earlier, the articles you mentioned about the studies of the mitigation of moving it an extra 50 feet. Because you and I have talked about that type of article and the data that represents.
Right.
What do you say to people who say, well, we've not seen any data that,
Sure.
that this works? What would you say to those folks?
So we set up, first of all, I understand that question, you know, without going through and doing the research on your own. We do have citations in our regulations that the regulations were based off of. So that's a resource that can be tapped into. But we wanted to make that information more readily available to the general public, so we established a webpage under both our own conservation webpage and the planning board, all about this buffer zone expansion with several links to scientific literature that was used to establish, you know, current regulations that deal with buffer zones and buffer strips, which is Regulation 29 under Chapter 172. And other information that's out there that centers on the benefits of a buffer zone and how it can provide pollution attenuation and wildlife habitat value in a developed setting. And there's no question that the most intense congregated development that we have here in town is along our coastal water bodies and inland water bodies. That's where development is most concentrated and in very close proximity to waters and wetlands. So these scientific, journals and articles really center on the recognition of that being the existing condition.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. You're
Sure.
very helpful.
Great. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, is there someone from the Board of Appeals?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm David Morris. I'm the building commissioner for the town of Mashpee and zoning enforcement officer.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So we're looking for some more information regarding Article 44, which is the petition article for the raise and replace removal. And just, we can start probably just by educating us on what raise and replace is.
Okay, raise and replace, it's a zoning bylaw that was implemented. It was put in, I guess it was passed in 2018. And as that can change non-conforming existing houses, where you can demolish them and rebuild, as long as you don't create new non-conformities. I wish I didn't have, I should have brought the bylaw with me. I could have quoted it to
okay.
you and told you more about it, but the intent is for, you know, sometimes these houses, you know, where they're battered, or they're in bad positions, or they're beyond repair. They can be ripped down and replaced.
Right. And basically staying within the same footprint that was existing before.
Pretty much, yeah, you can, yeah, in the zone, the board is pretty good. They do not want any non-conformities, and they want you to better the property, you know, and they don't like to see you increasing a non-conformity. So as long as the property is better, they work for that as a lot, especially with lot coverage. They're trying to prevent what so-called McMansions, you know, so that comes up a lot, that they, you know, lot coverage, they don't want it to exceed a certain amount. They'd rather even see, in some cases, be less than what it is.
Yeah. So what does the Board of Appeals feel the effect of this proposed article, which would delete the raise and replace, have?
I think it would have, I would say, in my opinion, it would be devastating to property values in the town. If you want to decrease the property values in the town, this would be the way to do it, to repeal this raise and replace.
And why is that? Because that just means that somebody would not be able to raise or replace? Isn't there another way they could do it?
Not really. The only you could continue a nonconformity, you know, I mean, the only way you could raise and replace an existing structure is if everything is in conformity. So you can do that by right. You can say, Dave, you come in with a proposal, you will not have to go to the board to get a special permit. You have to get a special permit from the board. It's not approved by me, it's approved by the zoning board. So there aren't many lots, you know, maybe some of these older lots, they have maybe two or more acres, and they do conform, and they got an old house that's been there for maybe 200 years, and they could do it by right, but there's not many of them. So a lot of these houses, small cottages, or, most like the Conservation Commission just said that, most of the concentration is near water, and you get a lot of older houses that are in flood zones. They need to be raised. So if you want to do any kind of work to them, you have to bring them up to not only FEMA codes, but now they get new energy codes, which makes it unbelievably hard for any of these places to conform. And that's going to happen pretty soon. So I think that even in the near future, we'll be talking about, the stretch energy code system, because that is going to make it very hard for people to even do any kind of remodeling in their home, especially if your home is not worth a lot of money.
How many homes are we talking about? How many homes would fall into this category where you couldn't raise it or?
Raise and replace, how many homes?
Yeah,
Most of the town, pretty much the whole town. There would be, I would say, a handful that wouldn't need relief for a raise and replace.
What would be preventing somebody from saying, okay, I'm gonna raise and replace, but what I'll do is I'll leave this bedroom?
Well, that's where you're gonna have to go back to.
Yeah.
But again, you're replacing more than 50%. Say, so a lot of these places, say, like a cottage, I can give you examples. The land values, why I say the property values will plummet. Say, on the coast, on the coastal land, it just, the land is worth over $1 million, you know, a lot of them are worth, even a postage size lot is worth about 900, not over 900,000. And they got a house, they got a structure on there that's maybe 100,000, it's worth about $100,000. So if you want to, say in the next year or two, you want to remodel your kitchen and bathroom, now you're at 50%, it's $50,000 worth of work, you're at 50% of the structure. So now you have to raise that out, you gotta make that conforming in the flood zone. You gotta raise that out of the flood zone, and you gotta conform to today's energy code, which means you would need to, you know, they have a HERS rating system, which right now would be at, instead of a 55, it would be down to 53, and within the next year and a half, in July of next year, it'll be down to a 43. So you're gonna have to do quite a bit of work, like probably hundreds of thousands, if not, even, you know, probably close to $100,000 just to conform the energy code. You're gonna have to make it solar ready, and you're gonna have to put an energy, you know, an ESS hookup for an electric vehicle. That's mandatory.
And that's
Even if you don't-
now, or that's
Even
coming?
if, even if,
Right
even if you
now.
don't have an electric vehicle?
That's right now, yes. It was effective January
I'm
1st.
not getting one.
So, and it's getting more stricter, so it's getting outrageous, so.
Wow.
To take away the raise and replace would be a horrible situation at this time.
Wonder if you had two lots, you combine two lots together, you can make that conforming.
I doubt it.
You doubt it?
I doubt it. You need to, you know, for an R3 to form, you need an acre of land. Most land, you know, in an R5, which is the town, mostly R5, it's 2 acres. So you need more than, you know.
Be tough to do that.
It would be, but you'd have to own both lots, and pretty much they would be combined anyways,
Right, right.
unless, you know, unless they have 2 dwellings on them at now. That's the thing, you're gonna lose a lot of houses. Say you have a disaster, flood disaster, and a house gets pushed off its foundation, that's it, you're done. The house is gone.
What did people do before this law was enacted 5 years ago?
It's the same thing we just spoke about, leaving up a wall, leaving up one
Right.
wall, and, you know, trying to build it as best you can.
Right.
Try to stay within conformity, and you can't, that's the way it was. So doing this is better for the environment, it's better for especially in the floodplain, they become, the structures, the foundations are made to withstand a flood event. And where they are standing now, they're just brick walls getting smashed in by a flood.
What would keep a homeowner from trying to do the renovation piecemeal instead of, like you're saying, do bathrooms and kitchens? Suppose they just wanted to do one bathroom this year, and then a year or two do a second bathroom, and a third or fourth year do the kitchen. And try and do it piecemeal rather than obviously doing the whole thing with.
Again, yeah, I mean, that can be done, you just, you know, pull the permit and close it out, and, you know, but the energy code, again, will be tough to get around.
The energy code will catch up with you.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to, everything's going to have to be brought to, you know, at least, there's 2 types of energy codes, but, you know, you know, it's compliant, I don't know what it's not compliance, but it's, I can't think of the word right now, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You know, you'll have to bring everything, you know, again, you can do that. I mean, I don't frown upon that, and I'm probably more willing to work with people than a lot of people on the Cape, a lot of commissioners.
Yeah. Say you wanted to add a in-law apartment, or you wanted to add another room to the house. Would repealing, raise, and replace affect that type of scenario too?
It could, yeah, absolutely. And if you're doing another a dwelling unit, that would definitely bring the energy codes in, because you have to, it's a new dwelling unit. So you'd have to bring that right up to current standards.
Would you have to bring the whole house up to standards or just this one?
It's very possible, yeah. It's, very possible. Depending on whatever. So if you're connected to the house, yeah, probably, if you're doing a second level, that's a substantial improvement, or what they would call something that's more than 50% of the home.
Right.
So, yeah, so it's gonna be tough enough to even do remodeling in your home, let alone, where the raise and replace is a very good option. I think that it does bring you to the zoning board automatically, so you do have to go through all that mitigation things that are going, so it goes through a rigorous, it doesn't happen just overnight, as a lot of people know, and it does go through the health department. It's good for the town, it's good for the homeowners, it's good for property values.
Well, it's good it comes before your board, because you guys get to vet that yourselves. And you get to look at it and determine if this is doable or not.
Correct,
Is that right?
correct, yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of back and forth between consultants, homeowners, and
Yeah.
the board. to
There's a
make
lot,
things
there's
right.
a lot that goes through me as a zoning enforcement officer, before it comes to the board. If they're not even ready, or if they're gonna be way behind it, I tell them, you gotta get this up there, get that up there, and it is a giant process, it's under a lot of scrutiny, and I think it does well. It's a good process. It's better than leaving me up in charge of everything that goes on.
And am I correct in saying it's under a lot of scrutiny, not just from your department, but it'd be under scrutiny from conservation?
Absolutely.
The health department? So you have a lot of eyes looking at this.
90% of these raise and replaces go through conservation, 100% go through health. Except for special permit areas, I shouldn't say that, but they do go through all the other departments, so it makes the whole property better than it was, in my opinion.
So it's not just the zoning board of appeals looking at this.
Correct.
It's these other groups looking at this, and if there's an issue, they handle that, everyone working together for the best outcome.
It's the best way to get everybody on the same page, right? That's the way it is. They ask for everybody's opinion during every raise and replace.
Well, I can say that for my
application.
husband, I know that he talks to all of them
I'm
if he
sure.
has any questions.
Are there many denials if somebody comes before the Board of Appeals and wants to raise and replace, are there many denials?
Yeah, of course, there is, yeah. But, again, they do work with, the board tries to work, I try to work with them and tell them that, your chances are better this or that. And they, so if they get denied, they do get denied. There are raise and replaces that do get denied. But they usually understand why before they happen, and they can appeal it, and they can be appealed. So it's a good process, and I think it's been working very well.
So in your position, would you say you would be for or against this article?
This article here, I would be totally against it. I don't think it's, I think the way it is, the raise and replace, to abolish it would be the wrong thing to do. It would be 100% wrong thing to do.
And that's your expert opinion.
That's my expert opinion.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Let's see. Seeing none? All right.
So just one quick question. When the petitioner comes forward, and how does that impact the petitioner? Does it make them, when it comes to your committee and they want to do a raise in place, is there a lot of, paperwork, a lot of checks and balances, regular inspections of the property to make sure things are done in a correct way?
Well, they submit quite a bit of paperwork. They submit a plot plan with the existing conditions, the proposed conditions. Again, 90% of them already have gone through the Conservation Commission, so their recommendations are carried over. There are recommendations on all the ones that have septic systems of recommendations through the Health Department, the Board of Health, Fire Department, if they get involved, which is possible. They have a lot of bylaws that pertain to them.
Right.
All those committees come in. They have drawings of the home with the levels. They have to meet a lot of criteria for conformity. So.
Right. So what would be the motivation, you think, or the reason someone would want to repeal a raise and replace?
Well, the motive, it says here that raise and place has not been employed in the spirit promised, resulting in detrimental building height, lot coverage, and impacts on natural resources. It hasn't raised the building height, I don't know, or lot coverage. They're still the same. So they always, within those conformities, and as I mentioned earlier, they want to see that, if it's non-conforming, they want to see these non-conformities shrunk, not expanded. As a rule.
As well.
So then the petitioner on this particular article then wasn't totally knowledgeable about the work that has been done?
Well, I think it's very narrow-minded. I think the petitioner, I would say that this comes from the Pompanesett area, and I think it's very narrow-minded. This is a town-wide bylaw. It's not just for the Pompanesett area. So I think that, I think that it's very narrow-minded, very vague for the reasons why they want it repealed.
And make sure I understand what you're saying. So that this doesn't affect coastal areas, it affects any house in town?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Any non-conforming house.
Right.
Which, again, there's not many conforming houses.
All right, thank you.
Very good.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you
your
coming.
time.
Yeah.
All right, next, moving on to the articles we have on hold at the moment. Let's see, we've got 3 articles in the special town meeting warrant that are currently on hold. The first one is related to the snow and ice accounts, which we still have no amounts on yet.
Right.
So I guess it's,
Yeah, still keep that one on hold. This
Keep that
next-
snow away.
The next is the transfer from the revenue available for appropriation to the capital stabilization fund.
Which article is that?
It's Article 2 in the special. Is there a motion to remove the hold?
Did the select board go over all these again on Monday, because I didn't watch?
I have no idea. I haven't gotten a new draft with any votes or anything, so I have no idea.
So we assume that this draft is still.
Yeah, as far as I know, the draft.
our resident knowledge
I
person?
didn't hear the question.
I wanted to know if the select board made any changes to this draft of the articles, because the last we heard, they had put Article 2 on hold, and I didn't know if
No.
there was a change.
Other than adding Article 11, they didn't change.
Thank you.
Chair.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Looking to entertain a motion to remove the hold on Article number 2 in the special.
Make a motion.
I'll second it if you want to talk about it. Okay.
Any opposition to removing the hold?
Has a dollar amount been established with it, or is that the 1.9 million?
So we'll get into that, but I'm looking for if there's any opposition to removing the hold, so we can discuss it.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's all right.
No worries.
All right, hearing none, passed by unanimous consent. All right. All right, now, we'll entertain a motion regarding Article number 2. To recommend or not recommend.
I recommend that we recommend it.
All right, got a motion to recommend, is there a second?
I'll second it so we can discuss it.
All right. You now have an active motion. All right, so the motion is to recommend Article 2, which appropriates and transfers $1,964,629 from revenue available for appropriation to the Capital Stabilization Fund. Discussion on the article. And that is still the amount.
I'm sorry?
Just responding to Richard's question, that is the amount that they've set this up.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Does this occur every year, the same kind of article?
Yes.
Is it a standard article?
It's a standard article, established 2 years ago,
Yeah.
when they decided to create the capitalization stabilization fund,
Okay.
so that they'd start putting money aside for capital projects in the future. And the select board set it at 15% is what they would transfer in annually.
I'm good.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a vote to recommend this article. Glenn? Yes. Lee?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes,
Yes.
Greg? Darlene? I'm yes. All right. All right. The next article in the special we have on hold is Article number 4, which is to appropriate and transfer $378,080 from the Community Preservation Fund budget for appropriation reserve to fund the Quashnet School Playground Improvement Project Phase 2. Is there a motion to remove the hold on this?
Motion to remove the hold.
Is there a second? You got a second? All right. Any discussion?
where does this money go to? To which group does the actual work?
It would go through DPW.
Yeah, it's gonna go through DPW.
Again, it would go through DPW. We're not here to discuss why it goes through DPW. We're here to discuss this, though. We understand your concerns, but that's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss this article and if we should go forward with it or not. The DPW does the work, not any other committee at this point. There's a planning committee and a building committee that review these things, and then, of course, the CPC reviewed it as well. So
Well,
that's
why-
who does the work, though, or who farms out the work, does the estimates and all these things.
I'm having trouble with that.
I know you are.
Is there any opposition to removing the hold on this article? Seeing none, passes by unanimous consent. Is there a motion to recommend or not recommend this article?
I make a motion to recommend this article.
I'll second it.
All right, discussion regarding recommending Article number 4.
Well, looking into it, it was interesting. I think there's some more things to be done. I mean, they've done some work there before. This is part of a second phase plan. I think, redoing the basketball court, and they're making, right now, I think they're going to, if I understood it correctly, they're making, there's 2 courts that they're going to also make it pickleball ready. Not necessarily for citizens can play there, and they're off hours, but kids play that too. So it's not just, adults. And it's part of the continued phase that they've already started. And it says that the DPW, Richard, actually perform some of the work. I don't know how much work it will perform, but it will perform some of
Maybe
the
they will get
work.
the entire amount of money to do that work,
Yeah.
the $378,000. Where I'm coming from is that there's supposed to be a permanent building committee in the town. And I thought the work for the appropriation for money like this, for renovations or for new construction, is supposed to go through that permanent building committee, is my understanding, looking at the charter. And if the money is going to the DPW, I don't understand why it goes to the DPW and not to the permanent building committee to do the work. That's where I'm coming from. The thinking being that the permanent building committee should be the people that do the renovation and new construction work, manage it and run it and make sure it happens the way it's supposed to happen. And we've been dumping this money into the DPW, all this construction stuff, everything from the sewers and everything else that goes directly into the DPW to do the work. What does the permanent building committee do? Nothing. That's the problem.
Well, I think it's only a problem if the work isn't getting done.
No, the issue is a little bit more systemic than that. I mean, the DPW has a lot of work to do normally, okay? Between plowing the roads and mowing the lawns, keeping the buildings running, and everything else that the DPW does in small construction areas, and things need to be fixed and what have you. If you put in major construction projects into the DPW, then it kind of blows it up into a whole new category.
But they're not necessarily doing the major
Right.
construction
Normally,
problems.
normally what happens in a major construction, when you have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of new construction, let's say like the sewer treatment plant. Normally what you do is you have to get a study done, you have to get an architect, you have to get a design done, and you put the jobs out to bid. Then you manage the project after that. If that's all being done by the DPW, that's something, a lot of work into there.
I don't know if the DPW is exactly doing the sewers, okay? My understanding, that's run by the sewer committee and by the select board with our town engineer. They're the ones putting that together. Town engineers helping out with the bids, and those being accepted by the different variety of
My
committees.
point being is that permanent building committee should be doing just what you just said.
And that may be how, but this is how it's being done at the point, and this is what we're voting on. We're not voting on a change to any of these.
And what I'm saying is that charter that we have for the town puts that permanent building committee in the business of doing just what you were saying. Soliciting, doing the architectural work, doing the design work, putting the jobs out to bid, and then policing the job as it goes through the process. In other words, make sure the building's being built, if there's issues where it's behind schedule or over budget, whether you have change orders to be approved, blah, 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 blah. All that stuff should go through the permanent building committee, not through the DPW.
But that is probably a part of a different discussion, because right now our discussion is whether we should approve the sum of this money to do the improvement project, not whether we should be talking about who should be doing the
Right.
building
But-
versus. I think that's another subject.
That's another topic. That's not what we're here to decide.
But where is it, I mean, where does the $378,000 go to? Where does it
It's
say?
going to DPW to handle this project.
Yeah, that's the point.
Right, and that's all we're voting on and discussing right now.
And that's what
We're-
I'm,
we're
that's what I'm
not-
having, that's what I'm having trouble with.
I got
I
it.
respect that, yeah.
I got it. And that's something that needs to be brought up outside of this committee to town manager, select board.
Right.
Yeah, but, yeah, that's true, but it's in the article here, where the money's going, isn't it? Does it say DPW? Yeah, it does the last
It
sentence.
said the cost of the project is
The
300,
The DPW will also perform some of the.
Some of this work.
Some required
Yeah.
work. So I'm having trouble with that.
but other work would be vetted out as well, contracted out after bids are taken and all the normal process is done.
But who does?
I imagine the DPW does.
some-
Well, it goes through the town manager
Yes,
overall.
yes.
He has to say as to who actually handles the contracts and does that.
Yes, that's the point being, is that the permanent building committee should be the people who do that.
I got it, but that's not the issue right now. That's your issue, that needs to be taken up with the town manager, the select board, and
Charter committee.
the charter committee, and the permanent building committee. Like, they're the ones that,
You should be getting the money.
no, they're the ones you should be talking to about why this seems to be happening. All right, that will bring us into the main town meeting warrant. All right.
Wow, that moved very quickly, didn't it? That one.
Articles 16 through 23, I assume we're going to continue on hold because we have no amounts for those yet.
Yeah,
All right, that will bring us to Article 29. Article 29 is to amend Section 174-25H12 of the Mashpee zoning bylaw, table of use regulations, by adding the letters SP. All right, this here, we have not, the planning board, we've asked them to come in, so 29 through 31, we have no additional information. Any opposition to letting them remain on hold?
I think it'd be nice to hear from Evan
Yeah.
about those.
All right, we'll keep 29 through 31 on hold at the moment. Article 35, this is one of the Conservation Commission ones. Amend Section 172-2 jurisdiction of General Bylaw, Chapter 172 wetlands to increase the current 100-foot buffer zone to 150 feet. Is there a motion to remove the hold on this?
Motion to remove hold.
There you go, second. Any discussion on removing the hold? Hearing none, passed by unanimous consent. All right, is there a motion to recommend Article 35?
is this different than the one we just heard about, the 100 feet to,
No, this is what the,
100 foot to 150 feet change?
this is what the Drew was talking about earlier. Is there a motion to recommend or not recommend Article 35?
I make a motion to recommend 35.
Mhm. Is there a second?
For sake of discussion, second.
All right. Discussion on Article 35.
We all heard the same thing,
Yeah.
We did.
so did it answer everybody's question?
He answered my question.
Yeah.
Answered my question.
And how did that affect your thinking, Darlene?
my thinking in general is that we're losing a lot of property through erosion, so it just, you know, I think of the folks that may be holding a piece of property that,
But talk about that a little bit,
that's all. I mean, I feel badly about that.
right?
That has nothing, it's not gonna impact our making a decision on it, but I do feel very badly if I happened, or you happen to be one of the, well, what do you say, 20-something, but a smaller amount.
23 folks on
Yeah,
that
so
lot,
let's
yeah.
say 3 or 4 people are holding pieces of property that they're gonna give back to get a tax write-off, but not enjoy the property that they wanted to have in the first place.
Right.
Or that could pass down from grandparent to parent to, but that's just being somebody that feels, you know, from an emotional standpoint,
I understand.
that's all.
But he did say even some of those lots may not be able to be,
Well, I don't think they will be.
yeah, even now.
Right, no, oh, I know. I'm surprised it was 23. I thought it was less than that.
But 23 that
That
are,
in general.
They're
have not
undeveloped,
been- That are
yes,
undeveloped. I was
yes.
surprised they were 23.
Yeah.
I thought it was less. But that's just from an emotional, that's, I feel badly, you know, but,
right. I mean, I think there's a gain, from what he said, and from what we've heard and what I've read, there could be some amount of mitigation toward the problems we're having, right?
yes, and I thought he was very, very good at explaining the fact that they do work with the
Yeah,
homeowners and work with all of the agencies to try to, I think, find a reasonable way for it to get done. So I
Yeah,
thought
I
that
agree.
was good.
I just feel that we are in such need of solutions for our water problems that I agreed with him that this wouldn't cost town anything. That doesn't mean it might not cost the individual property owner something. But I believe for the sake of the town, that's why I made a motion to approve this for the sake of the water in our town.
And that's the big issue, right?
That is the big issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And this is a low, now, you're right, it may not cost the town anything, it may have some cost to the homeowner in several different levels, we don't know what that is, because everyone's individual. That could be from planting a few trees, doing a whole new landscaping deal, into a smaller house, we don't know. But is the payoff, in the long run, the question is the payoff worth it in the long run for the town, for our recreational waters? That's the question. If you think it is, if you think it's not, it's up to us to determine that, each person.
Well, Drew is more of an expert in conservation than I am certainly, and it appeared to me that he favored this because of providing, you know, wild habitat areas for saving some of our wetlands, and he felt it would be a good step that wouldn't cost the town any money to help our water situation. So
Right.
I sort of listened to both.
Yeah.
we have, 3 or 4 articles in front of us, 35, 36, 38, and 39, which keep mentioning the 100-foot and 150 feet. Is that,
Well, those are petitions, a couple
Yeah,
of petition
yeah.
articles that are
Yeah.
there. So this article is by the Conservation Committee.
Right.
Some other people have come before us and as petitioners and put in basically the same article.
Basically in case this doesn't go through, if it gets tabled or anything, there's another chance to vote on it. Or if it gets pulled at the last minute.
Right.
should we, supposing we should not approve those articles, the ones that are all repetitive? To me, they seem to be quite repetitive.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I mean, because if we approve them all, then they're just going to keep on appear on the warrant.
No. They're on the warrant.
the
one
warrant
way or
period.
another.
Unless the selectmen pull it.
No, they
No, the
can't.
selectmen cannot pull a petition article.
Well, that's right. That's right.
That's why they're there.
That's right.
Because the petition, the select board could end up removing 35 and 36 at town meeting.
Right.
The petition articles, they can't remove, those would have to get voted on, and that's why they're there, in case these get pulled.
And let's say 35 does get approved by town meeting. The one that was kind of redundant going forward, the petitioner could come forward and ask for an indefinite postponement.
Right.
They could do that, and that could be approved.
Yes.
What happens if we did not approve it?
We're not approving anything.
Well,
We're making a recommendation.
Right.
I'm sorry.
So we can either recommend, not recommend, or make no recommendation.
No recommendation.
And come town meeting, 3 of us can say yes, 4 of us can say no, and when we vote, we all vote in the town meeting. This doesn't take precedent over what we do at town meeting.
This is just a recommendation to the townspeople.
Supposing we did not recommend these because they're repetitive, what would then happen?
You could do
Nothing.
Nothing, they
would happen.
would still appear on the.
Right.
It would be up to the petitioner
Okay,
to,
there's no way to stop it.
right.
No.
So,
Any further discussion on Article 35?
well, I think it's, at the end of the day, pulling it forward and let the townspeople decide. I think they should make a decision.
Yeah.
I think we should determine what we want to do with that.
Right, so right now, the motion is to recommend the discussion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote on recommending Article 35. Glenn? Lee?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes,
Greg?
Yes.
Darlene?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And it brings us to Article 36. This is the second conservation article to extend the NVSB buffer to 75 feet from 50 feet. Is there a motion to remove the hold on this article?
I move to remove the hold.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. Any opposition to removing the hold? Hearing none, passed by unanimous consent. Is there a motion to recommend Article 36?
Say, I'm sorry.
Is there a motion to recommend or not recommend Article 36?
I make a motion to recommend 36.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we got a motion to recommend Article 36. Is there any discussion?
I think we heard pretty much,
Yeah,
Yes,
the
same story,
yeah.
yeah. And again, if there's, I mean, regardless of what we recommend or not recommend, townspeople should be, they should be knowledgeable about this before we walk in the door at town meeting. Hopefully they'll get their blue books and they'll read them, and they'll call and ask questions, and come to town meeting and have their voices heard. That's what's really crucial.
I mean, I've never seen such a wave of articles all on the same, basically the same subject like this before.
I'm not seeing it in mine. Yeah, I know, but we just,
Well, it's insurance, Richard.
I understand that, but it's,
I'm not seeing it here, so, thank you.
You're welcome. Hearing no discussion, we'll take a vote. Darlene?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
yes.
Richard? Lee?
Yes.
Glenn? Yes. And I'm a yes. All right. That's that. All right. So the next things we have on hold are 38 through 44. These are all the petition articles. I am reaching out to the petitioners to have confirmed to be at our next meeting to discuss that, to give us any information and answer any questions we may have. So, and that includes the petitioner for 44, the raise and replace, looking to have that individual be at the next meeting, so, is there anything anybody wants to take off hold at this point, or do you all want to wait?
I'll wait.
All right, we will-
Do we have a guarantee that someone will be here for Article 44? We heard from anyone on that?
I don't believe I've heard from that individual yet.
How about 43, the one on the solar panels?
That's, the planning board will be here to talk about solar panel articles, I believe. That individual, I don't know whether I've heard from that individual yet either. But all the petitioners,
We could do, we could take a motion on anything.
yeah, so if you wanna remove the hold on 44, we can then talk about it and vote on it, or we can put it back on hold.
I make a motion to remove the hold.
Is there a second? You got a second? Any discussion on removing the hold on Article 44? Hearing none, any opposition to removing the hold on Article 44?
No,
All right, passed by unanimous consent, the hold is removed. Is there a motion to recommend or not recommend Article 44?
I make a motion not to recommend.
I'll second that.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Discussion on Article 44.
Discussion?
It works. I did it with my house. I'm very happy they have it in place.
I was under the old guidance. I still have an old wall left over, but that was fine. But it took,
Well, the house that I
Yeah.
had an old piece of the original basement.
really,
It was ridiculous.
What'd you have to do about it?
I waited for the raise and replace and threw it on the house completely.
Oof,
But that's what needed to happen.
Was it non-conforming before you
Yes.
raised it?
and you had to do things to make it more conforming.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know, I mean, his arguments, I thought, were very concise. Here's someone that's an expert, speaking for it as an expert, understanding what's going on in the town, and the values of property. You know, both these issues are interesting. They're property rights on one hand, on one article, and what's best for the town. And then here, this is sort of similar, but it's more like property values. And, you know, that could be an interesting, and I don't want that, you know, jump, and it's also not just the waterways this is detrimental to. It could be
construction too.
any house in town.
Well, that's-
You're right.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's a
right.
problem.
It is a problem.
I just want someone to just put a kitchen on and a half bath. And they have to, and they can't because that's been repealed, or there's a whole process bigger that they have to go through and work with. I
But
think
if
that's,
the structure is not safe, for whatever reasons,
Yeah.
or non-conforming,
right.
then it has to be either fixed or taken down. Because it becomes a hazard to the people that are living there as well as, you know,
Any further discussion on Article 44? All right, hearing none, we will take a vote on not recommending Article 44. Darlene?
Yes, I cannot recommend that.
Greg?
Yes.
it's,
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. It's a 6-0 vote not to recommend Article 44. All right. That takes care of all the articles that are on hold at the moment. We can move on to new business. We have no updates from the town manager. That will bring us into review of the article explanations, which I sent out to everybody for some of the articles. All right, so let's start with the explanation for Article 1 of the special, which is the snow and ice. Yeah. This article appropriates and transfers the funds necessary to offset a deficit in the snow and ice account. This article will have no impact on the current tax rate. Basically, just want to make sure that the explanation tells what the article does as clearly as possible for the average town citizen to understand it. That's what we're trying to go for with these explanations. Any comments, modifications, or anything anybody would like to make to that explanation?
Looks fine.
No issue.
All right, let's go on to the next one. For Article 4, the Cape Cod Tech operating budget. This article approves the annual regional school district budget for the Cape Cod Regional Technical High School, CCRTHS, and raises and appropriates Mashpee's required share of the CCRTHS assessment in the amount of $981,293.
Jeff, will this particular article have any tax rate impact?
Yes, it does.
Oh, okay.
Because this is part of the calculation of the tax rate.
No, it's paid in increments, quarterly,
Yes.
okay, which is what this was all about here.
The explanation for Article 12, authorizing the expenditures under Chapter 90. This article authorizes the raising, borrowing, or transferring of $595,357 from revenue available for appropriation to fund road improvement projects. These funds will be 100% reimbursed by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts under the Chapter 90 program. The town would be able to improve the roads prior to the receipt of the funding. This article will have no impact on the current tax rate.
Again, who gets the $595,000? DPW?
They're the ones that will be doing most of the work, yeah.
That's where I have trouble.
Well, that's their job is repairing the roads and things like that, so.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Article 19, appropriate funds for the Mass COP Local 320 Unit B Sergeant contract. This article appropriates and transfers the funds from revenue available for appropriation necessary to cover the additional fiscal year 2024 expenditures related to the newly negotiated contract with the Mass COP Local 320 Unit B Sergeants Union. This article will have no impact on the current year tax rate. Article 26, amends general bylaw, chapter 170, use of waterways to prohibit engines or motors greater than 10 horsepower on Situate Pond. This article adds to the waterways regulations, chapter 170, to prohibit the use of any engine or motor of greater than 10 horsepower on Santuit Pond. This is recommended by 2 consulting firms for the purpose of minimizing turbulence and to protect water quality. This article will have no impact on the current year tax rate.
Looks good.
Article 33, create one full-time circulation assistant position in the library. This article creates one full-time circulation assistant position at the library and appropriates and transfers $37,402.79 from revenue available for appropriation to fund this position. This position will replace two established and funded part-time circulation assistants that exist currently. This is part of the library's efforts to meet its certification requirements for being open a minimum of 50 hours per week and continue to be a part of the Cape Library's Automated Materials Sharing Clams nonprofit consortium. This article will have no impact on the current year tax rate.
Looks good.
Good, yep.
All right, Article 40, the petition article authorizing the select board to plan laying out and defining Blue Castle Drive. This article appropriates and transfers $10,000 from revenue available for appropriation for the layout and plan design necessary to convert Blue Castle Drive from a private way to a public way owned and maintained by the town. This step is a prerequisite for a subsequent road taking, which will also require voter approval. This design ensures that the road will conform to the town's road building standards. This and the subsequent construction costs will be recovered by the town via a betterment assessment on the properties abutting the road. This article will have no impact on the current year tax rate.
Looks good.
All right.
Yeah, just as a point of curiosity, how do they collect the $10,000 for the work from the abutters? They assess them individually?
Yes. And that won't be done until after the.
The town appropriates the money first, and then they
Right,
go back and get it.
that's correct. And more than likely, it won't be until after the actual
Work is done.
work is done to better the road and everything. So the betterment will be assessed all at once. All right. We'll make a motion to accept these explanations.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Any opposition? Hearing none, passed by unanimous consent. We'll get these explanations all set. All right, that takes care of that. We've got more explanations coming in. We'll go over those next week. Again, I'll have them sent out to everybody, hopefully by Wednesday, so that you'll have a chance to read them all before we vote on them.
And they're due next week, is that right?
We don't have a final due date yet, but we probably can go one more week, because we've still got a little bit of time before we have to have the report due. It's just a matter of getting as much done ahead of time, so we're not as pressured.
Right, at the end.
Come down that last week. All right. Any additional topics? Just to update you, I've started working on the charts in graphs and stuff that we normally add to our report. I need to contact the town accountant, finance director, to get some information from her, specifically the tax rate, the loan statuses and things like that, and the revenue, so we can add those to the information that'll go in there. And when I've got those all done, I'll be sending that out to everybody to review for us to discuss and vote on. I've also begun work on the opening letter for us to all approve. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I'll have that completed as well. All right. Anything else? All right, next meeting is in this room on the 23rd at 6:30. That, and we'll definitely have the planning board and several of the petitioners here to provide information. All right?
Next meeting is the 23rd.
Yep, that's correct. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
In a second. Any discussion? Any opposition? Hearing none, passed by unanimous consent. We are out of here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.